Imagine the perfect life, a loving marriage, a luxurious mansion, and a long-awaited baby on the way. But what if that dream crumbles when you overhear your husband plotting your downfall with your best friend? What if it's not just an affair, but a calculated scheme of financial fraud, gaslighting, and a hidden network of powerful men destroying women's lives today? We're diving into the shocking, true inspired story of Sarah Mitchell, a betrayed wife who fights back, sues her millionaire husband for everything, and leaves him homeless in a courtroom twist you won't believe. From devastating discoveries to ultimate triumph, this tale of resilience will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stick around till the end to see how one woman's courage changes everything. If this story resonates with you or reminds you of someone who needs to hear it, smash that like button to show your support. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. Share this video with friends who love empowering dramas, and hit subscribe with notifications on so you never miss our next gripping episode. Let's build a community of strength together. Your engagement means the world. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her designer maternity dress as she sat in her pristine white Range Rover outside Dr. Martinez's office. At 38, she had everything a woman could want: a millionaire husband, a sprawling mansion in Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhood, and now, growing inside her, the baby they had tried for 3 years to conceive. Her manicured fingers trembled slightly as she dialed David's number, the ultrasound photos still warm from the printer. After 15 years of marriage, she still felt butterflies when calling her successful hedge fund manager husband. "David, honey, you won't believe what I just saw," Sarah began, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Our baby is absolutely perfect. The doctor says everything looks wonderful, and I got the most amazing pictures to show you." "That's great, sweetheart." David's voice sounded distant, distracted. Sarah could hear the familiar sounds of his home office in the background, the soft click of his keyboard, the rustle of papers. But then she heard something else that made her blood freeze. A woman's laugh. Not just any laugh. Jessica's distinctive, melodic giggle that Sarah had heard countless times during their weekly coffee dates and girls' nights out. "David, is someone there with you?" Sarah's heart began to race, but she forced herself to sound casual. "What? No. No one's here. Just have the TV on. Listen, babe, I'm in the middle of something important. Can we talk about the baby stuff later?" Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel. In 15 years of marriage, David had never called their attempts to start a family baby stuff. This pregnancy was supposed to be their greatest joy, their fresh start after years of fertility struggles. "Of course," she managed to say, her voice barely steady. "I'll see you at home." As Sarah drove through their affluent neighborhood, she couldn't shake the image of Jessica's silver BMW that had been parked in their circular driveway that morning when she left for her appointment. Jessica had mentioned needing to drop off some book club materials, but something about her best friend's behavior had seemed off. Sarah's mind raced back to recent conversations. Jessica had been asking strange questions about David's work schedule, about their marriage, about whether Sarah ever felt taken for granted. At the time, Sarah had assumed her friend was just being supportive, maybe concerned about the stress of pregnancy after so many disappointments. The Mitchell estate came into view: 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, pool, tennis court, and gardens that Sarah had lovingly tended for years. This house had been her sanctuary, the place where she had transformed from a young marketing coordinator into the perfect wife for a rising financial star. She had given up her career dreams to support David's ambitions, hosting dinner parties for his clients, managing their social calendar, creating the picture-perfect life he needed to succeed. Now, as she pulled into the driveway, that same silver BMW was still there. Sarah's pregnancy hormones made everything feel more intense, but this wasn't just emotional sensitivity. Something was deeply wrong. She had always prided herself on her intuition, and right now every instinct was screaming danger. She gathered her purse and the precious ultrasound photos, steeling herself for whatever she might find inside. As she approached the front door, she could hear voices coming from the direction of David's home office. voices that were definitely not coming from a television. The front door opened silently. Sarah had always loved their grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier, but today it felt like entering a tomb. She moved quietly across the marble floor, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. She doesn't suspect anything. She heard David's voice clearly now. Sarah's completely focused on the pregnancy. She barely pays attention to anything else these days. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more. Are you sure about this? Jessica's voice was softer, but the words cut through Sarah like a knife. I mean, she's my best friend. I feel terrible about lying to her. You feel terrible? David's laugh was bitter, nothing like the warm sound Sarah was used to. You're the one who came to me. Remember, you're the one who said you'd always had feelings for me, that you couldn't stand watching me waste my life with someone so ordinary. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Ordinary. After 15 years of dedicated marriage, of supporting his every dream, of sacrificing her own ambitions, he called her ordinary. I know, Jessica replied. It's just harder than I thought it would be. She's so excited about this baby, and she keeps talking about how perfect your life together is going to be. That's exactly the problem, David said. She thinks this baby changes everything, but it doesn't change how I feel. If anything, it makes this whole situation more complicated. Sarah had heard enough. She crept back toward the foyer, her mind reeling. Her best friend and her husband, the two people she trusted most in the world, had been plotting behind her back. But plotting what? Exactly, she needed proof. Evidence. Something concrete that would help her make sense of this nightmare. Fighting back tears, she climbed the stairs to their master bedroom, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what was happening. In their walk-in closet, among David's perfectly organized suits and her own carefully curated wardrobe, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach lurch. A small jewelry box she didn't recognize, tucked behind David's tie rack. With shaking hands, she opened it. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet she had never seen before, along with a note in David's handwriting. For my real soulmate, soon we won't have to hide anymore. The room began to spin. Sarah sank onto the plush carpet, clutching the ultrasound photos to her chest. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complete betrayal of everything she had believed about her life. As she sat there, processing the magnitude of what she had discovered, she heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets of footsteps, accompanied by hushed voices and barely suppressed laughter. Sarah's world, built on 15 years of love, trust, and shared dreams, was about to shatter completely, and she had no idea that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every ounce of strength she possessed. The footsteps grew closer, and Sarah knew there was no going back to the blissful ignorance she had woken up with that morning. Sarah's hands trembled as she slipped the jewelry box into her purse and made her way back downstairs. The voices from David's office had gone quiet, but she could hear movement, the soft sound of papers being shuffled, whispered conversations, the unmistakable intimacy of two people who had shared secrets. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Sarah knocked firmly on the office door. "David, I'm home," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady given the chaos in her mind. There was a moment of scrambling from inside before David's voice called back. "Just a minute, honey." When the door finally opened, David appeared with his usual confident smile. But Sarah noticed things she had missed before: his slightly rumpled shirt, the faint trace of Jessica's perfume lingering in the air, the way his eyes couldn't quite meet hers. "How did the appointment go?" he asked, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Sarah had to fight the urge to pull away. "Wonderfully," she replied, studying his face for any crack in his facade. "Dr. Martinez says the baby is developing perfectly. I have pictures." She held out the ultrasound images, watching David's reaction carefully. For just a moment, she saw something flicker across his features. Was it guilt, regret, or just annoyance at being interrupted? "That's fantastic, babe," he said, taking the photos with what seemed like forced enthusiasm. "Really amazing." "Where's Jessica?" Sarah asked casually. "I saw her car outside." "Jessica." David's eyebrows rose in what appeared to be genuine confusion. "She's not here. Maybe you saw a similar car." The lie hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had seen Jessica's BMW dozens of times, knew the small dent on the rear bumper from when Jessica had backed into a parking meter. There was no mistaking that car. "Oh," Sarah said, deciding to test him further. "Well, I thought I heard voices when I came in." "Just a conference call with some clients in Tokyo," David replied smoothly. "You know how these international markets are. Never sleep." Every word felt like another betrayal. Sarah had spent 15 years believing that honesty was the foundation of their marriage. Now she was discovering that her husband could lie to her face without even blinking. "I'll let you get back to work then," she said, turning to leave. "Actually, Sarah," David's voice stopped her. "We need to talk about something." Sarah's heart stopped. Did he know that she knew? Was he about to confess everything? "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about our financial situation with the baby coming," David said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "I think it might be wise to make some adjustments to our accounts. Maybe set up some trusts. You know, for tax purposes." Sarah stared at him. Even now, in the middle of betraying their marriage, he was thinking about money and legal protections. "What kind of adjustments?" "Nothing major. Just moving some assets around. Maybe putting some things in different names. I'll handle all the paperwork. You don't need to worry about the details." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. After what she had overheard, this conversation felt less like financial planning and more like preparation for something much more sinister. "I'd like to understand the details," she said firmly. "This affects our baby too." David's smile became strained. "Sarah, honey, you're pregnant and emotional. You don't need to stress yourself with complicated financial stuff. That's my job." "Emotional?" The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. "I'm asking reasonable questions about our family's financial future." "Look," David said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You've never shown interest in money matters before. Why start now? You're probably just feeling anxious because of the pregnancy hormones." There it was, the dismissal she had heard in his voice when he was talking to Jessica. Sarah wasn't emotional or hormonal. She was finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. "David, I heard Jessica earlier," Sarah said, deciding to confront him directly. "I know she was here." For a moment, David's mask slipped completely. Sarah saw anger flash across his features before he regained control. "You're being paranoid," he said coldly. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The pregnancy is making you imagine things that aren't there." "I'm not imagining anything," Sarah replied, her voice growing stronger. "I heard her voice. I heard you both talking." "About what, exactly?" David challenged. "What do you think you heard?" Sarah realized she was trapped. She couldn't reveal what she had actually overheard without admitting she had been eavesdropping. And David's confidence made her second-guess herself for a moment. "I just know she was here," Sarah said weakly. "Sarah, listen to yourself," David said, his tone now patronizing. "You're creating problems that don't exist. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Martinez about these paranoid thoughts. They can't be good for the baby." The suggestion that her mental state might harm their child was the cruelest blow yet. Sarah felt tears threatening, but she refused to give David the satisfaction of seeing her breakdown. "I'm going to lie down," she said, turning toward the stairs. "That's probably a good idea," David called after her. "Get some rest. I'll be working late tonight." As Sarah climbed the stairs, she heard David's office door close and the unmistakable sound of a phone being dialed. She paused on the landing, straining to hear. "Coast is clear," she heard him say quietly. "She's suspicious, but I handled it." "Can you get out through the back garden?" Sarah's knees gave out, and she sank onto the carpeted steps, finally allowing the tears to fall. The man she had loved and trusted for 15 years was orchestrating her humiliation right under her own roof. But as she sat there, sobbing into her hands, something unexpected happened. Beneath the devastating hurt, Sarah felt a spark of something else. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at being manipulated and dismissed. She thought about the ultrasound photos in her purse, about the innocent life growing inside her, who deserved better than this toxic situation. She thought about all the years she had sacrificed her own dreams to support David's career. Sarah wiped her tears and stood up. She might be pregnant and emotional, but she wasn't stupid. And she certainly wasn't going to let David and Jessica destroy her life without a fight. That night, as David claimed to work late in his office, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would find out exactly what was going on, and she would protect herself and her baby no matter what it took. The perfect wife was about to become a very dangerous enemy. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah's devastating discovery, and she had spent every day quietly gathering evidence. Hidden in her car's glove compartment was a growing file of photographs, copied documents, and detailed notes about David's suspicious behavior. She had also made an appointment that David knew nothing about. Rebecca Chen's law office was located in downtown Hartford, far from David's usual haunts. Sarah had chosen the attorney specifically because Rebecca specialized in high-asset divorce cases and had a reputation for protecting betrayed wives from powerful husbands. "Mrs. Mitchell," Rebecca said, gesturing for Sarah to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her imposing mahogany desk. "Thank you for coming in. I understand you're dealing with a difficult situation." Sarah had rehearsed what she would say, but sitting in this sterile office made everything feel terrifyingly real. "I believe my husband is having an affair with my best friend, and I think he's planning to divorce me." Rebecca's expression remained professionally neutral. "What makes you think he's planning a divorce? He's been moving money around, talking about changing our financial arrangements, and I overheard him and my friend discussing me like I was some kind of obstacle they needed to overcome." "How long have you been married?" 15 years. "We have a prenuptial agreement, but I signed it when I was young and naive. I didn't really understand what I was agreeing to." Rebecca pulled out a yellow legal pad. "I'll need to review that prenup. But first, let's talk about your assets. What does your husband do for work?" "He's a hedge fund manager. Very successful. Our house is worth about $3 million, and I know he has various investment accounts, but I don't know the details. I never paid attention to the money side of things." "That's about to change," Rebecca said firmly. "In Connecticut, we have equitable distribution laws, which means assets acquired during marriage are typically split fairly, regardless of whose name they're in. But prenups can complicate things." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "So I might be entitled to half of everything." "Potentially, yes, but we need to move quickly. If your husband is already transferring assets, we need to get court orders to prevent him from hiding money." Over the next hour, Rebecca explained the harsh realities of high-asset divorce. There would be forensic accountants, private investigators, and legal battles that could drag on for years. The process would be expensive, emotionally draining, and very public. "I need you to understand something, Mrs. Mitchell," Rebecca said as the meeting concluded. "Men like your husband don't go down without a fight. He'll try to paint you as unstable, unfit, or unreasonable. He'll use your pregnancy against you if he can. Are you prepared for that kind of warfare?" Sarah thought about the ultrasound photos she carried everywhere, about the baby who deserved a secure future. "Yes," she said with more conviction than she felt. "I'm ready." That afternoon, Sarah drove to her sister Monica's house in West Hartford. Monica had always been her voice of reason, the successful career woman who had warned Sarah about giving up too much of herself for marriage. "I knew something was wrong," Monica said, pouring tea in her modern kitchen. "You've seemed different lately, distracted, sad. I thought it was just pregnancy stress." "I should have seen the signs earlier," Sarah admitted. "But I was so focused on finally getting pregnant, on making our family complete, that I ignored everything else." "Don't blame yourself," Monica said firmly. David is the one who chose to betray his marriage vows. You trusted your husband. That's what wives are supposed to do. Monica, there's something else, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I think Jessica might be pregnant too. Monica's teacup clattered against its saucer. What? I saw her at the pharmacy last week buying prenatal vitamins, and she's been avoiding coffee at our book club meetings. Plus, she's been asking weird questions about my doctor, about whether I like the practice. You think she's planning to use the same OB/GYN? I think she's planning to replace me entirely, Sarah said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. Think about it. If she's pregnant with David's baby, and I'm pregnant with his baby, but they're married and I'm divorced, Monica's face went pale. He could claim you're the unstable ex-wife while she's the stable new family. Exactly. And with our prenup, I might walk away with almost nothing while they get everything. My house, my husband, my social circle, even my doctor. The two sisters sat in silence, the magnitude of the betrayal settling over them like a dark cloud. We're going to fight this, Monica said finally. I have some money saved up if you need help with legal fees. And I know people, investigators, accountants, other lawyers. You're not facing this alone. That evening, Sarah returned home to find David in an unusually good mood. He had flowers waiting for her, white roses, her favorite, and had ordered dinner from the expensive Italian restaurant where they had celebrated their anniversary every year. What's all this for? Sarah asked, trying to keep suspicion out of her voice. Do I need a reason to celebrate my beautiful pregnant wife? David asked, pulling out her chair with exaggerated gallantry. But as they ate, Sarah noticed David steering the conversation toward legal and financial topics. He mentioned that he had spoken to their family lawyer about updating their wills now that they were expecting. He suggested that Sarah might want to have her own attorney review the documents, just to make sure she was comfortable with everything. That's very thoughtful, Sarah said carefully. Actually, I've been thinking about getting more involved in our financial planning. Maybe I should meet with your investment advisor, understand our portfolio better. David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. That's not necessary, sweetheart. I handle all that stuff, so you don't have to worry about it. But I want to understand it, Sarah pressed. Especially now that we're having a baby. I should know where our money is, how our investments work. Sarah, you've never shown interest in financial matters before, David said, his tone sharpening slightly. Why the sudden curiosity? Because I'm about to be a mother, Sarah replied. I want to be able to protect our child's future. David studied her face for a long moment, and Sarah had the uncomfortable feeling that he was evaluating how much she might know or suspect. Of course, he said finally, his smile returning. We'll set up a meeting next week. I want you to feel completely secure about our future. But Sarah could see the calculation behind his eyes, and she realized that her husband was planning something much more devastating than a simple affair. The real war was just beginning. The next 3 weeks brought a series of disasters that left Sarah reeling and questioning her ability to cope with everything crashing down around her. It started on a Tuesday morning when Sarah woke up feeling dizzy and nauseated. Not the familiar morning sickness she had been managing, but something much more alarming. When she tried to get out of bed, the room spun violently, and she collapsed back onto the mattress. David, she called weakly, but there was no answer. She could hear the shower running in their ensuite bathroom, the sound of David's morning routine proceeding as normal, while she struggled to remain conscious. By the time David emerged, dressed in one of his expensive suits and checking his phone, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed with her head in her hands. I feel terrible, she managed to say. Something's wrong. David glanced at her with what seemed like annoyance rather than concern. You're probably just dehydrated. Drink some water and you'll be fine. David, this isn't normal morning sickness. I think I need to see the doctor. I can't drive you today. I have back-to-back meetings with major clients. Can't you call an Uber? Sarah stared at her husband in disbelief. 15 years ago, David would have canceled anything to take care of her. Now he was suggesting she take a rideshare to the emergency room while pregnant and barely able to stand. Fine, she said. reaching for her phone with shaking hands. "I'll call Monica." "Good idea," David said, already heading for the door. "Your sister loves playing nurse." By the time Monica arrived, Sarah's blood pressure had spiked to dangerous levels. Dr. Martinez met them at the hospital, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious concern. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to monitor you closely," he said after reviewing her test results. "Your blood pressure is extremely elevated, and we're seeing signs of preeclampsia. This can be very serious for both you and the baby." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, fighting back panic. "It means complete bed rest for the foreseeable future. No stress, no physical exertion, no emotional upheaval. Your body is telling us that something is putting too much strain on your system." Sarah thought about the constant tension at home, the sleepless nights spent worrying about David's betrayal, the stress of secretly consulting with divorce attorneys. Her body was responding to the emotional trauma she had been trying so hard to manage. "How long?" Monica asked. "At least until we can get her blood pressure stabilized, possibly for the remainder of the pregnancy." As Sarah was discharged with strict instructions and multiple medications, she realized that her ability to investigate David's activities had just been severely limited. She would be essentially housebound, dependent on David for everything, just when she needed independence most. But the health scare was only the beginning of her troubles. 3 days later, while Sarah was following doctor's orders and resting in bed, her phone began buzzing with notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Confused, she opened the apps to find dozens of messages from friends, family members, and acquaintances. Someone had posted a series of photos and videos on social media that painted Sarah as an unstable, jealous wife who was harassing innocent people. The posts claimed that Sarah had been stalking David's female colleagues, making threatening phone calls, and had suffered a mental breakdown during her pregnancy. The photos were particularly damaging. They showed Sarah looking disheveled and upset outside Rebecca Chen's law office, crying in her car in various parking lots, and what appeared to be her following David's car. Sarah realized that someone had been documenting her activities for weeks, waiting for the right moment to use the evidence against her. "This is character assassination," Monica said angrily after Sarah called her in tears. "Someone's been setting you up." "The timing is perfect," Sarah said bitterly. "I'm stuck in bed, unable to defend myself, while someone destroys my reputation online." But the social media attack was just the setup for the knockout punch. That evening, David came home with papers from his attorney and a look of grim determination on his face. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, sitting on the edge of their bed. "I've been getting calls all day about these social media posts. People are concerned about your mental state." "Those posts are lies," Sarah said, struggling to sit up against her pillows. "Someone is deliberately trying to make me look unstable." "I want to believe that," David said, his voice full of fake concern. "But combined with your paranoid accusations about Jessica, your sudden obsession with our finances, and now this health crisis, I'm worried about you." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "What are you saying? I think you need professional help, and I think it might be best if you took some time away from stress while you get the help you need." "Time away from what stress?" David's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "I'm filing for separation, Sarah, and I'm requesting temporary custody of the baby when it's born." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "You can't do that. I'm not mentally unstable. The social media posts suggest otherwise, and Dr. Martinez's reports about your elevated blood pressure and stress levels support the concern that you're not coping well with reality." Sarah realized with horror that David had been planning this for months. The financial maneuvering, the isolation tactics, even encouraging her to see a therapist. It had all been building toward this moment when he could paint her as an unfit mother and take everything. "I won't let you do this," Sarah said, reaching for her phone to call Rebecca. "Actually," David said, producing another set of papers, "you don't have much choice in the matter. I've already frozen our joint accounts pending the legal proceedings. The court needs to protect our assets from any impulsive decisions you might make in your current state. Sarah's phone showed missed calls from Rebecca, her bank, and her credit card company. While she had been lying in bed recovering from a pregnancy complication, David had been systematically cutting off her access to money, support, and legal resources. "You planned this," she whispered. "The whole thing. Jessica, the affair, the social media attack, even encouraging me to see Dr. Martinez more frequently so you'd have medical documentation of my stress levels." David's smile was ice cold. "I plan to protect myself and my future child from a woman who's clearly having psychological problems. Everything I've done has been in the best interests of our family." As David left the room, Sarah realized she was completely trapped. No money, no mobility due to her medical condition, and now facing a legal battle where her own husband was using her pregnancy against her. But even in her darkest moment, as she lay alone in the bedroom she had shared with David for 15 years, Sarah felt a spark of fierce determination. David had underestimated her strength, and he was about to learn that a pregnant woman fighting for her child was the most dangerous opponent he could face. The war was far from over. 3 weeks into her forced bed rest, Sarah felt like a prisoner in her own home. David had been coldly polite, bringing her meals and medications while treating her like an unstable patient rather than his wife. Monica visited daily, but their conversations were stilted and careful, both women aware that David might be monitoring everything. That changed on a rainy Thursday morning when Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Marcus Rodriguez. I used to work with your husband at Hartwell Capital. I think we need to talk." Sarah's heart raced. "I'm sorry. I don't think I should be discussing my husband's business with—" "Ma'am, I'm not calling about business. I'm calling because I know what David is doing to you, and I have information that could help." Sarah looked around her bedroom, suddenly paranoid that David might have installed listening devices. "I can't meet with anyone right now. I'm on bed rest." "I understand, but Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to know that you're not David's first wife to go through this." The words hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. "What do you mean?" "I mean, David Mitchell has done this before. The affair, the financial manipulation, the character assassination, it's his pattern, and I have proof." Sarah's hands shook as she wrote down the coffee shop address Marcus gave her. Against all medical advice, she waited until David left for work, then carefully made her way to her car. The Java Junction was a small, unassuming cafe in a strip mall, 20 minutes from her house. Marcus Rodriguez was easy to spot, a nervous-looking man in his 40s, sitting alone at a corner table with a manila envelope in front of him. "Thank you for coming," he said as Sarah carefully lowered herself into the chair across from him. "I know this is risky for you. You said David has done this before." "What did you mean?" Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph of a woman Sarah didn't recognize. Blonde, attractive, probably in her early 30s. "This is Amanda Richardson. She was David's first wife." Sarah stared at the photo. "David told me he had never been married before." "David tells a lot of lies. They were married for 4 years, from 2003 to 2007. Amanda was a teacher when they met, gave up her job to support David's early career." "Sound familiar?" Sarah's mouth went dry. "What happened to her?" "Same thing that's happening to you. David had an affair, moved money around, then painted Amanda as mentally unstable when she tried to fight back. She ended up losing almost everything in the divorce." "Where is she now?" Marcus pulled out another document. "Teaching at a public school in Vermont, living in a one-bedroom apartment, still paying off legal debts from the divorce." David's prenup with her was ironclad, and he had convinced the court that she was having psychological problems. Sarah felt sick. "How do you know all this?" "Because I helped him do it," Marcus said, his voice heavy with shame. "I was young, ambitious, and David promised me a partnership if I helped him move assets offshore before the divorce proceedings. I falsified documents, lied to investigators, even helped plant evidence to make Amanda look unstable." Why are you telling me this now? Because I've spent 15 years feeling guilty about what we did to an innocent woman. And because I know David is doing it again, only this time he's gotten better at it. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. These are copies of financial documents from David's first divorce, showing exactly how he hid assets. There are also communications between David and his lawyer about manipulating Amanda's medical records to suggest mental instability. Sarah leafed through the papers, her horror growing with each page. This is criminal fraud. Yes, it is. And I'm willing to testify about it if it will help you. But why would you risk that you could go to prison? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because 3 months ago, Amanda Richardson committed suicide. She left a note saying she never recovered from what David did to her, that she couldn't live with the shame and financial ruin anymore. Sarah gasped, her hand instinctively moving to her pregnant belly. David destroyed that woman completely, and I helped him do it. I won't let him destroy you too. As Sarah drove home, her mind raced with the implications of what Marcus had revealed. David wasn't just cheating. He was a predator who specialized in isolating and destroying the women who trusted him. But Marcus's revelations also gave her something she hadn't had before: hope. If she could prove that David had committed fraud in his first divorce, it might invalidate their prenup and expose his current scheme. That afternoon, Sarah called Rebecca from her car parked outside a medical plaza, pretending to be at a doctor's appointment. This changes everything, Rebecca said after hearing about Marcus's evidence. If we can prove David has a pattern of financial fraud, we can argue that your prenup was signed under false pretenses. He misrepresented himself as a first-time husband with legitimate assets. What do we do next? We need to move fast. I'm going to file for an emergency hearing to freeze all of David's assets before he can move more money. And I'm hiring a forensic accountant to trace everything he's hidden. Rebecca, there's something else. I think Jessica might be pregnant with David's baby. Do you have proof? Not yet, but I'm going to find it. If David is planning to start a new family with Jessica while bankrupting me, the court needs to know. That evening, David came home in an unusually good mood. Over dinner, he made casual conversation about baby names and nursery decorations, as if he hadn't spent the morning with lawyers planning to take their child away from her. I've been thinking, David said as he cleared their plates, maybe we should consider counseling, to work through these trust issues you've been having. Sarah looked at her husband, this man who had systematically destroyed his first wife and was now trying to do the same to her, and managed to smile. That's a wonderful idea, she said. I think counseling would be very helpful for both of us. David had no idea that Sarah was now armed with information that could destroy him, and she was going to use every piece of evidence Marcus had given her to ensure that Amanda Richardson's tragic death would not be in vain. The hunted was about to become the hunter. Sarah's newfound determination was tested the very next day when Dr. Martinez called with news that made her blood run cold. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to see you immediately. There's been a development with your medical records that we need to discuss. Sarah arrived at the medical office with Monica, who had insisted on driving her. Dr. Martinez's usually warm demeanor was replaced by obvious concern and confusion. Sarah, someone has been calling our office claiming to be your husband, asking detailed questions about your mental state and requesting copies of your psychological evaluation reports. What psychological evaluation reports? Sarah asked, genuinely confused. Exactly. We don't have any such reports because you've never had a psychological evaluation here. But whoever was calling seemed to expect that we did. Monica and Sarah exchanged glances. Doctor, has anyone else been asking about Sarah's medical information? That's the strange part. Last week, a woman calling herself Jessica Mitchell claimed to be Sarah's sister-in-law and said she was concerned about Sarah's pregnancy-related depression. She asked very specific questions about medication dosages and hospitalization protocols. Sarah felt the world tilt. Jessica isn't David's sister. She's my best friend, or was my best friend. Dr. Martinez frowned. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you directly. Have you given anyone permission to access your medical information besides your husband and sister? Absolutely not. Then we may have a serious privacy violation on our hands. I'm required to report this to the authorities. As they left the medical office, Sarah's mind was reeling. David and Jessica weren't just having an affair. They were actively trying to build a medical case for her mental instability. We need to find out exactly what Jessica's role is in this, Monica said as they sat in the parking lot. And we need to do it today. That afternoon, while David was at work, Sarah made a decision that went against every piece of medical advice she had received. She was going to confront Jessica directly. Sarah knew Jessica's schedule perfectly after years of friendship. Every Thursday at 2 p.m., Jessica had a standing appointment at the Sanctuary Day Spa for what she called her self-care ritual. If Sarah was going to catch her alone and off guard, this was her best opportunity. The Sanctuary was an upscale wellness center in West Hartford, the kind of place where wealthy women went to maintain their perfect appearances. Sarah felt underdressed in her maternity clothes as she made her way through the serene lobby with its soft music and lavender scents. She found Jessica in the relaxation lounge, wrapped in a plush robe and sipping herbal tea. For a moment, looking at her former best friend, Sarah felt a stab of nostalgia for their old relationship. The shopping trips, the long phone calls, the shared secrets and dreams. Then she remembered the conversation she had overheard, and her resolve hardened. "Hello, Jessica." Jessica looked up, startled, nearly spilling her tea. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be resting?" "We need to talk," Sarah said, sitting down in the chair across from Jessica. "And you're going to tell me the truth for once." Jessica's face cycled through several expressions: surprise, guilt, and finally, defiance. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the affair," Sarah said quietly, aware that other spa clients were nearby. "I know about you calling my doctor's office pretending to be David's sister. I know about the social media posts. What I don't know is why." Jessica was quiet for a long moment, her hands fidgeting with her robe's belt. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "You want to know why? Because I've been in love with David since college, and I've had to watch you live the life that should have been mine for 15 years. Sarah stared at her former friend. "College David and I met in college. You were dating that guy from your economics class." "I met David first," Jessica said, her voice growing stronger and more bitter. "We were in the same business ethics course. I was the one who introduced you to him at that party. Remember, I thought he was perfect for me? Ambitious, smart, going places. But then you walked into the room with your perfect smile and your sweet personality, and he couldn't see anyone else." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You've been planning this for 15 years. Not planning exactly, but waiting, watching, hoping that someday David would realize he had settled for the wrong woman. So you became my best friend to stay close to him." "I became your best friend because I genuinely cared about you," Jessica said, and for a moment her voice softened. "That was real, Sarah, but it was also convenient. I got to see David regularly, be part of your social circle, watch for cracks in your marriage. And when you found those cracks, you widened them." Jessica's expression hardened again. "I didn't have to widen anything. Your marriage was already failing. David told me months ago that he felt trapped, that you had gotten boring and clingy, that he stayed with you out of duty rather than love. So you offered him an alternative. I offered him honesty. I told him how I really felt, and he admitted that he had feelings for me too. We tried to fight it. Sarah, we really did. By having an affair and trying to destroy my reputation. We're in love," Jessica said defiantly. "And yes, I'm pregnant. David's baby deserves to grow up in a stable home with parents who actually want to be together." Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "You're really pregnant. 12 weeks. We found out right after you announced your pregnancy. It's like fate. Sarah, we're meant to be a family. And what about my baby? What about me?" Jessica's expression became cold. calculating. You'll be fine. You're resilient, and your baby will have a father who's financially secure. David isn't trying to hurt you. He's just trying to create the best possible future for everyone. By painting me as mentally unstable and taking away my child, by getting you the help you obviously need, Jessica said. Sarah, look at yourself. You're paranoid. You're following people around. You're making wild accusations. Maybe this breakdown is exactly what you need to get your life together. Sarah realized that Jessica truly believed her own justifications. In her mind, she was the hero of this story, finally getting the man she deserved while helping her troubled friend get psychological help. Jessica, Sarah said carefully, do you know about Amanda Richardson? For just a moment, confusion flickered across Jessica's features. Who? David's first wife. Jessica's face went pale. David was never married before? Yes, he was. And he did to her exactly what he's doing to me. The affair, the financial manipulation, the character assassination. She ended up losing everything. That's impossible, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. David would have told me. Would he or would he tell you exactly what he told her? That you're different, special, that you understand him in a way his boring wife never could. Sarah could see doubt creeping into Jessica's eyes, and she pressed her advantage. Jessica, what happens when David gets tired of you? When you're no longer the exciting mistress, but just another wife with responsibilities and demands? What happens when the next young, beautiful woman catches his attention? Stop it, Jessica said, but she was shaking now. He's using you to get rid of me, just like he used someone else to get rid of Amanda. And when he's done with you, he'll find another woman to help him get rid of you too. Jessica stood abruptly, her spa robe billowing around her. You're just trying to manipulate me because you're losing. David loves me. We're going to have a beautiful life together. But as Jessica hurried away toward the spa's exit, Sarah could see that seeds of doubt had been planted. Jessica was beginning to realize that she might not be the mastermind of this scheme, but simply David's latest victim. Sarah sat alone in the peaceful relaxation lounge, surrounded by the sounds of trickling water and soft music, and realized that her former best friend might actually become her most powerful ally. Because nothing was more dangerous than a woman who realized she had been manipulated by the man she loved. The confrontation with Jessica marked a turning point for Sarah. That evening, as she lay in bed supposedly resting, she made a list of everything she knew for certain and everything she still needed to prove. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was thinking strategically rather than just reacting to David's manipulations. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jessica. We need to talk. I looked into what you said about Amanda Richardson. You were right. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. Jessica had done exactly what Sarah hoped she would, investigated David's past, and apparently, she hadn't liked what she found. The next morning, Sarah told David she was feeling better and wanted to start taking short walks for exercise. Dr. Martinez had actually recommended gentle movement as long as her blood pressure remained stable, so David couldn't object without seeming unreasonably controlling. Sarah's first walk took her to the Hartford Public Library, where she had arranged to meet Jessica in the quiet section of the local history wing. Jessica looked terrible, pale, exhausted, and clearly shaken. She had a folder with her that she slid across the table to Sarah without speaking. I hired a private investigator, Jessica said quietly. I told him I was researching my boyfriend's background for a pre-marriage financial planning meeting. I never mentioned that the boyfriend was married to someone else. Sarah opened the folder to find David's true history laid out in devastating detail. Marriage certificate for David Mitchell and Amanda Richardson, dated 2003. Divorce decree dated 2007 showing Amanda had received almost nothing despite a 4-year marriage. Police reports from Amanda's neighbors about domestic disturbances. Loud arguments, Amanda crying in her car, David leaving the house at strange hours. There's more, Jessica said, her voice hollow. Amanda tried to report financial fraud during their divorce proceedings, But David's lawyers buried her claims under paperwork and legal delays until she ran out of money to fight. Sarah flipped through bank records, medical reports, and court documents. The pattern was identical to what was happening to her now. "Jessica, I'm so sorry," Sarah said, meaning it. "I know you cared about him." "I loved him," Jessica corrected. "Or I thought I did." But reading Amanda's statements to the police, the way she described feeling isolated, manipulated, made to doubt her own sanity, I realized I was helping him do that to you. You were being manipulated too. Was I? Jessica's laugh was bitter. Or was I just so desperate to believe I was special that I ignored obvious red flags, Sarah? He has a file on you, in his home office, photos, medical records, financial documents, recordings of your conversations. Sarah's blood went cold. Recordings. He's been recording your phone calls for months, and he has recordings of me talking to you, discussing your mental state and concerning behavior. He's been setting both of us up. The magnitude of David's planning was staggering. He hadn't just been having an affair. He had been orchestrating a comprehensive destruction of Sarah's life while simultaneously gathering ammunition to control Jessica. "There's something else," Jessica said, pulling out her phone. "I recorded our conversation yesterday, the one where David explained how he was going to handle the Sarah situation long-term." Sarah's hands shook as Jessica played the recording. David's voice, cold and calculating, discussing how they would need to keep Sarah medicated and isolated after the baby was born, how they could use her postpartum depression to justify removing the child from her care permanently. "He's planning to have me declared an unfit mother," Sarah whispered. "Not just unfit, permanently disabled by mental illness. He's already researching facilities where you could be committed long-term." Sarah felt nauseated. David wasn't just planning to divorce her. He was planning to destroy her so completely that she would never be able to challenge him or reclaim her child. "Why are you helping me now?" Sarah asked. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Because yesterday, David told me that after we're married and things settle down, I should probably stop working. He said ambitious women make unstable mothers, and he wanted me to focus on being the perfect wife and mom. The same thing he told me 15 years ago. Exactly. And I realized that everything he loved about me, my independence, my career, my opinions, would become everything he resented about me once he had control. I was going to become the next Sarah, and some other woman would become the next Jessica." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Jessica's hand. "We can stop him, but it's going to take both of us working together." "What do you need me to do?" "First, and we need copies of everything in David's office file. Can you get access? He gave me a key to the house. He's been encouraging me to spend time there, getting used to our future home. Second, we need to document his current financial moves. Marcus gave me information about his past fraud, but we need evidence of what he's doing right now. I have access to his laptop sometimes. He's not as careful around me as he should be. And third," Sarah said, "I need you to keep pretending that everything is normal between you and David while we build our case. Can you do that?" Jessica nodded, though she looked sick at the prospect. "Sarah, I need you to know, I never intended for things to go this far. When David first approached me about his feelings, I thought it was just about two people falling in love. I didn't know about the financial manipulation or the plans to destroy you." "I believe you," Sarah said. "And Jessica, when this is over, I want us to try to be friends again. Real friends this time, not women competing for the same man." That afternoon, Sarah had her first real therapy session since discovering David's betrayal. She had been seeing Dr. Patricia Holbrook for general pregnancy-related stress, but now she had a different agenda. "Dr. Holbrook, I need your professional opinion about something," Sarah said. "If someone were systematically trying to make another person believe they were mentally unstable, what would that look like?" Dr. Holbrook's eyebrows rose. "That would be a form of psychological abuse called gaslighting. Are you concerned that someone is doing this to you? I'm concerned that someone might try to use your therapy notes to prove that I'm mentally unfit as a mother. Sarah, that's not how therapy works. My notes are confidential, and they document your mental health journey, not any predetermined conclusion about your fitness as a parent. But if someone wanted to build a case that I was unstable, could they misuse therapy records? Dr. Holbrook leaned forward, her expression serious. Sarah, are you in an abusive relationship? For the first time in months, Sarah felt safe enough to tell the complete truth. She explained about David's affair, the financial manipulation, the social media attacks, and the plan to have her declared mentally incompetent. This is classic psychological abuse, Dr. Holbrook said when Sarah finished. And I want you to know that my professional assessment is that you are responding normally to an abnormal situation. Your stress, your vigilance, your emotional reactions, they're all appropriate responses to being systematically betrayed and manipulated. Will you put that in writing? Absolutely. And Sarah, I'm going to recommend that you document everything that's happening. Keep a journal, save text messages, record conversations if it's legal in Connecticut. You're going to need evidence to protect yourself and your baby. That evening, Sarah began what would become her most important project, a detailed record of David's abuse and manipulation. She wrote down every incident she could remember, every conversation that had seemed strange, every time David had made her doubt her own perceptions. As she wrote, patterns emerged that she hadn't seen while living through them. David's gradual isolation tactics, his financial control, his manipulation of her medical care, it had all been building toward this moment when he could destroy her completely. But Sarah was no longer the trusting, naive woman who had signed a prenup without reading it carefully. She was becoming someone much more dangerous to David's plans, a woman who understood exactly what he was doing and was determined to stop him. The student was about to become the master. Sarah's transformation from victim to strategic adversary accelerated over the next 2 weeks. Working with Jessica, Rebecca, and Marcus, she began to assemble a case that would expose David's pattern of fraud and abuse. The breakthrough came when Jessica managed to photograph David's secret files while he was showering. The folder contained evidence that was even more damaging than Sarah had imagined: detailed psychological profiles of both Sarah and Amanda. Financial records showing systematic asset hiding dating back years, and most shockingly, correspondence with private investigators who had been stalking Sarah for months. Look at this, Jessica said, meeting Sarah at their usual library table. David has been paying someone to follow you since before I got pregnant. They have photos of you going to Rebecca's office, visiting Monica, even grocery shopping. And here, she pointed to a highlighted section of an email. They've been documenting your erratic behavior to build a case for mental incompetence. Sarah studied the investigators' reports with growing anger. Every normal activity had been twisted into evidence of instability. Her trips to the bookstore became obsessive behavior. Her phone calls to Monica were dependency issues. Even her pregnancy cravings were listed as impulse control problems. This is criminal stalking, Sarah said, and it proves that David has been planning this for months, maybe longer. There's more, Jessica said, her voice grim. I found correspondence with a psychiatric facility in Vermont. David has been inquiring about long-term commitment procedures for patients with pregnancy-related psychosis. Sarah felt cold dread wash over her. He's planning to have me committed after the baby is born. Not just committed. Look at this. Jessica showed Sarah a series of emails between David and his lawyer. They're planning to argue that your mental breakdown started during pregnancy and that the stress of childbirth will trigger a complete psychotic episode requiring immediate intervention. The plan was diabolical in its thoroughness. David would have Sarah committed immediately after giving birth, when she would be physically weak and emotionally vulnerable. With her locked away in a psychiatric facility, he could gain full custody of the baby and complete control of their assets. But we have evidence now, Sarah said, feeling a surge of fierce determination. All of this proves that David has been systematically planning to defraud me. It gets better. Jessica said with a grim smile. I also copied his financial records. Sarah, he's been stealing from his own clients to fund this operation. The private investigators, the lawyers, the psychiatric consultations. He's been paying for it all with money from his hedge fund. Sarah stared at the financial documents. That's federal fraud. If we can prove he's been misappropriating client funds, he could go to prison, Jessica finished, and all his assets could be frozen as evidence. That afternoon, Sarah met with Rebecca to present their evidence. The lawyer's excitement was palpable as she reviewed the documents. This changes everything, Rebecca said. With this evidence, we can go on the offensive. I'm filing for an emergency restraining order to prevent David from accessing any joint accounts or approaching any psychiatric facilities about you. And I'm requesting that the court freeze all of his business assets pending an investigation into financial fraud. What about the baby? Sarah asked. Can we protect my parental rights? Absolutely, with documentation of David's stalking and manipulation, plus Dr. Holbrook's professional assessment that you're responding normally to abuse. We can argue that David poses a threat to both you and the child. How long will this take? We should be able to get an emergency hearing within a week. But Sarah, you need to be prepared. Once we file these motions, David is going to realize that his plan has been exposed. He might become desperate and dangerous. That evening, Sarah prepared for what she knew would be her final performance as the unsuspecting wife. David came home from work in his usual good mood, completely unaware that his secret files had been compromised. How was your day, sweetheart? He asked, kissing her cheek with what seemed like genuine affection. Quiet, Sarah replied, marveling at how easily David could switch between his loving husband persona and his calculating manipulator identity. I've been reading and resting, just like the doctor ordered. Good girl, David said patronizingly. I've been thinking we should start preparing the nursery soon. Maybe this weekend we could go shopping for furniture. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, even as she wanted to scream at his casual mention of shopping for the baby he was planning to steal from her. Actually, David continued, I've been doing some research about postpartum care. I think it might be wise to have a professional caregiver lined up, just in case you need extra support after the birth. What kind of professional caregiver? Someone trained in postpartum depression and anxiety disorders. You know, just as a precaution. David's tone was casual, but Sarah now recognized it as the same tone he had used when discussing financial adjustments months earlier. That's very thoughtful, Sarah said, playing her role perfectly. I want to make sure I can be the best mother possible. Of course you do, David said, and Sarah could hear the condescension underneath his supportive words. That's why I'm making sure we have all the right support systems in place. After David went to bed, Sarah sat in their darkened living room, looking around at the home she had loved for so many years. Tomorrow, everything would change. Rebecca would file the emergency motions. David would discover that his carefully planned deception had been exposed, and their marriage would officially become a battlefield. But for the first time in months, Sarah felt genuinely hopeful. She had allies, evidence, and most importantly, she had learned to trust her own perceptions again. David had tried to destroy her sense of reality, but instead he had created a woman who was far stronger and more dangerous than the naive girl he had married 15 years ago. Sarah placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. Don't worry, little one, she whispered. Mommy's got this. The next morning would bring the fight of her life, but Sarah was finally ready for war. Sarah's contractions started at 3 a.m. on the Tuesday morning. Rebecca was supposed to file their emergency motions. The irony wasn't lost on her. After months of David trying to use her pregnancy against her, her baby had decided to arrive at the most crucial moment in their legal battle. David, she called out, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. I think it's time. David appeared in the bedroom doorway, looking disoriented and annoyed. Time for what? The baby. The contractions are 5 minutes apart. For a moment, Sarah saw genuine concern flash across David's features. perhaps the last glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with 15 years ago. Then his expression became calculating. "Are you sure it's still 3 weeks early?" "I'm sure," Sarah said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. "We need to go to the hospital now." The drive to Hartford Hospital was surreal. David made casual conversation about work and weekend plans, while Sarah breathed through increasingly intense contractions. She realized he was trying to keep her calm and unfocused, probably hoping she would be too distracted by labor to think about legal matters. But Sarah had spent months preparing for this possibility. Hidden in her hospital bag was a phone loaded with Rebecca's number, copies of all their evidence, and detailed instructions Monica had memorized in case Sarah needed emergency legal protection. Lily Sarah Mitchell was born at 2:47 p.m. after 11 hours of labor. Despite being 3 weeks early, she was healthy and perfect, with Sarah's dark hair and what the nurses insisted were David's blue eyes. As Sarah held her daughter for the first time, she felt a fierce protective instinct that dwarfed every other emotion she had experienced during this ordeal. This innocent baby would not become a pawn in David's manipulative games. "She's beautiful," David said, leaning over to stroke Lily's tiny hand. For a moment, he seemed genuinely moved by the sight of his daughter. "Yes, she is," Sarah agreed. "And she's going to have a wonderful, stable life." David's eyes met hers, and Sarah saw a flicker of suspicion cross his features. But before he could respond, Monica appeared in the doorway with a huge bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations," Monica said, embracing Sarah carefully. "She's absolutely perfect." What David didn't realize was that Monica's visit was the signal Sarah had been waiting for. While David stepped out to make phone calls announcing Lily's birth, Monica quickly confirmed that Rebecca had successfully filed all their emergency motions that morning. "The court granted temporary restraining orders on all of David's accounts," Monica whispered, "and there's a hearing scheduled for Friday. Rebecca says the judge seemed very concerned about the evidence you provided." Well, what about David's reaction? "He doesn't know yet. Rebecca timed the filing so he wouldn't be served with papers until after the baby was born. She wanted to make sure you had a few hours to recover before the war officially started." That few hours of peace ended abruptly when David returned to Sarah's hospital room with his phone pressed to his ear and fury written across his face. "What do you mean frozen?" he was saying. "On whose authority this is completely inappropriate timing?" Sarah watched as David realized his carefully orchestrated plan had been discovered and dismantled. When he hung up the phone, his mask had completely slipped, revealing the cold anger underneath. "Did you know about this?" he demanded, his voice low but venomous. "Know about what?" Sarah asked innocently, though her heart was racing. "Don't play games with me, Sarah. My lawyer just called. Someone has filed restraining orders against me, frozen my business accounts, and requested an emergency custody hearing. This has your fingerprints all over it. I've been in labor all day. David, when exactly would I have had time to file legal motions?" "You've been planning this," David said, his voice rising. "The paranoid accusations, the sudden interest in our finances, even getting sick right when I tried to make reasonable arrangements for our future. You've been setting me up." A nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. "Is everything all right in here?" "Everything's fine," David said quickly, forcing his expression back into concerned husband mode. "Just some stress about work matters." But Sarah could see that David was unraveling. The realization that he had been outmaneuvered was destroying his sense of control. "David," Sarah said calmly, "maybe you should go home and get some rest. The baby and I will be fine here overnight." "I'm not leaving you alone," David said, and Sarah heard the threat underneath his words. "Actually, visiting hours end in 30 minutes, the nurse interjected. "Only one overnight guest is allowed, and Mrs. Mitchell has listed her sister as her preferred companion." Sarah had never been more grateful for hospital regulations. As David was forced to leave, she could see him trying to formulate a new plan, some way to regain control of a situation that had completely escaped his manipulation. The next 3 days passed in a blur of feeding schedules, visitors, and legal consultations. Rebecca came to the hospital twice, updating Sarah on the court's response to their evidence. The judge has ordered a full forensic audit of David's business accounts, Rebecca reported, and the FBI is interested in the client fund misappropriation. Sarah, this could result in criminal charges. Ouch, what about custody of Lily? The court has granted you temporary full custody based on David's documented stalking and manipulation. He can have supervised visits only, and only after he undergoes psychological evaluation. Sarah looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms. It's really over. The immediate crisis is over. David can't access joint funds, can't approach you without court supervision, and can't make any claims about your mental fitness given Dr. Holbrook's professional assessment and all the evidence of his manipulation. But even as Rebecca spoke, Sarah felt a nagging worry. David was too intelligent and too calculating to simply accept defeat. He would be planning something, some final desperate move to regain control. Her instincts proved correct when Monica burst into her hospital room on Thursday evening with news that made Sarah's blood run cold. Sarah, David's gone. His lawyer says he failed to appear for a scheduled deposition this afternoon, and when they went to his office, it was cleaned out. Security cameras show him leaving with several boxes and a suitcase this morning. Sarah's arms tightened protectively around Lily. Do they think he's running? It looks like it. But Sarah, there's something else. Jessica called me an hour ago. She says David contacted her, asking her to meet him at some cabin in the Berkshires. She thinks he's planning to convince her to disappear with him. Sarah felt ice in her veins. David was cornered, desperate, and had nothing left to lose. That made him infinitely more dangerous than the calculating manipulator she had been fighting. We need to call the police, Sarah said. Rebecca already did. They've issued a BOLO alert for David's car, and they're treating this as a potential kidnapping situation since Jessica's pregnant. As Sarah sat in her hospital bed, holding her newborn daughter while her husband became a fugitive from justice, she realized that her victory in court might have created an even more dangerous situation. David Mitchell was no longer just a manipulative husband. He was a desperate man with nothing left to lose. The call came at 6 a.m. on Friday morning. Just as Sarah was preparing to take Lily home from the hospital, Jessica's voice was shaky but determined. Sarah, I'm okay, but you need to know what happened. David didn't try to kidnap me. He tried to make a deal. Sarah's heart raced as she adjusted the phone while keeping one hand on Lily's carrier. What kind of deal? He wanted me to testify that you had been planning to frame him for months, that you had manipulated me into helping you. He offered to split his offshore accounts with me if I would disappear with him to somewhere without extradition treaties. Please tell me you didn't agree. I recorded the entire conversation, Jessica said with grim satisfaction. Sarah, he admitted to everything, the affair, the financial fraud, even the plan to have you committed. He also told me something that I think you need to know. Sarah waited, dreading what new revelation was coming. David said that manipulating wives wasn't just his personal pattern. It was something he learned from someone else, someone who taught him how to systematically destroy women who became inconvenient. What do you mean? He mentioned a name, Dr. Richard Blackwood. Apparently, this man ran some kind of informal network of wealthy men who shared strategies for disposing of inconvenient wives while protecting their assets. Sarah felt sick. You're saying there are other men doing exactly what David did. Not just other men. According to David, Dr. Blackwood has been teaching these techniques to wealthy husbands for decades. Amanda Richardson wasn't David's first victim. She was just his first solo project. The implications were staggering. If Jessica was right, David's systematic abuse wasn't the result of his individual pathology, but part of a larger conspiracy to defraud and destroy women. Where's David now? The police arrested him at the cabin. He's being held without bail on charges of stalking, financial fraud, and attempted witness tampering. But Sarah, before they took him away, he said something that really scared me. What? He said that even if he goes to prison, Dr. Blackwood's network will make sure you never feel safe. He said there are too many powerful men involved for you to expose them all. Sarah looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, blissfully unaware that her father was a criminal and her mother was apparently the target of some shadowy conspiracy. Jessica, are you willing to testify about all of this? Yes. And Sarah, I found something else in David's belongings at the cabin. A list of names and addresses. I think they might be other women who were targeted by this network. That afternoon, as Sarah settled into Monica's guest room with Lily, Rebecca arrived with updates that confirmed Sarah's worst fears. The FBI is very interested in Jessica's recording and the information about Dr. Blackwood, Rebecca said. Apparently, they've been investigating financial fraud patterns in high-asset divorces for years, but they never had evidence of an organized conspiracy. So this is bigger than just David, much bigger. The names Jessica found include women from Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, and Vermont. Some of them are still alive and might be willing to testify. Others, Rebecca's voice trailed off. Others what? Others died under suspicious circumstances after their divorces were finalized. Suicides, accidents, unexplained medical emergencies. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather outside Monica's windows. How many others? At least 12 that they can identify so far. Sarah, you may have uncovered a conspiracy that's been operating for decades. Over the next few weeks, as Sarah adjusted to life as a single mother, the scope of Dr. Blackwood's network became clear. Federal investigators discovered that wealthy men had been paying Blackwood substantial fees to learn how to systematically destroy their wives while protecting their assets and reputations. The techniques were always the same: isolation, financial control, medical manipulation, and psychological abuse designed to make the victim appear unstable. The network included corrupt lawyers, private investigators, compliant doctors, and even judges who could be counted on to favor the husbands in custody and asset disputes. Sarah found herself at the center of a federal investigation that would eventually lead to dozens of arrests and convictions. But more importantly, she discovered a community of women who had survived similar ordeals and were ready to fight back. 3 months after Lily's birth, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the University of Connecticut, delivering her first public speech about financial abuse in marriage. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, looking out at the audience of students, lawyers, and advocates. "6 months ago, I thought I was a happily married woman expecting my first child. Today, I'm a single mother whose husband is serving a federal prison sentence for conspiracy to commit fraud." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. But I'm not here to talk about being a victim. I'm here to talk about how we can identify, document, and stop the systematic financial abuse that destroys women's lives while enriching the men who claim to love them. After the speech, a young woman approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think my husband might be doing some of these things to me. Who should I call?" Sarah handed the woman a card for the support network she had helped establish. "Call them today. Don't wait until it gets worse, because it always gets worse." As Sarah drove home to Monica's house, where she and Lily were building their new life, she reflected on how completely her world had changed. The naive woman who had signed a prenup without reading it carefully was gone, replaced by someone who understood the dark realities of financial manipulation and domestic abuse. But she had also discovered strengths she never knew she possessed: the ability to think strategically under pressure, to build alliances with former enemies, to fight for what was right even when the odds seemed impossible. That evening, as Sarah was feeding Lily and reviewing legal documents for the next day's FBI meeting, her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Detective Karen Walsh with the Vermont State Police. I'm calling about Amanda Richardson's death." Sarah's blood went cold. "What about it?" "We've reopened the investigation based on the evidence from your case. Amanda didn't commit suicide, Mrs. Mitchell. She was murdered. And we think Dr. Blackwood's network was responsible. Sarah looked down at Lily, who was watching her with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to understand that their lives were about to become even more complicated. What do you need from me, Detective? We need you to be very, very careful. If our investigation is correct, Amanda Richardson died because she was getting too close to exposing this conspiracy. You've already exposed more than she ever did. That night, Sarah lay awake in Monica's guest room, listening to Lily's peaceful breathing and thinking about Amanda Richardson, the woman whose tragic death had helped save Sarah's life. Sarah had won her battle against David, but the war against the network that had created him was just beginning, and she was no longer fighting just for herself and Lily, but for Amanda's memory and for all the women who might become targets in the future. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah made a promise to herself and to her daughter. She would use her experience, her platform, and her hard-won strength to make sure that no other woman would have to face what she and Amanda had endured. The perfect wife was gone forever, replaced by someone far more dangerous to men like David Mitchell, a woman who knew exactly how their game was played and was determined to change the rules. But even as Sarah committed herself to this larger fight, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the shadows, powerful men were watching her, planning their next move in a game where the stakes were life and death. The victory was real, but the danger was far from over. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her new home, a modest but comfortable house in West Hartford that she had purchased with her share of David's seized assets, preparing Lily's morning bottle. At 8 months old, Lily was developing a personality that reminded Sarah daily of her own strength and resilience. The kitchen table was covered with the familiar chaos of Sarah's new life legal documents from ongoing federal cases, speaking engagement requests, and business plans for the consulting firm she was launching to help other women navigate financial independence after divorce. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Guilty verdict on all counts. Blackwood got 25 years. Sarah smiled as she typed back, Amanda would be proud. The conviction of Dr. Richard Blackwood on conspiracy and racketeering charges marked the end of a network that had operated for over 30 years. 17 other men had been convicted alongside him, including David, who was serving a 12-year sentence for fraud, stalking, and conspiracy. But Sarah's satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. For every network they exposed, there were probably others operating in different cities, different social circles, different industries. A knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Jessica standing on the porch with her 4-month-old son, Marcus, named after the man whose courage had started Sarah's investigation. Come in, Sarah called, opening the door with Lily on her hip. How are you feeling? Better every day, Jessica replied, though Sarah could see the lingering traces of trauma in her friend's eyes. Some days I still can't believe how completely I was fooled. We both were, Sarah said gently. That was the point of their system, to make intelligent women doubt their own perceptions. Jessica had become one of Sarah's strongest allies in exposing the conspiracy. But Sarah knew that rebuilding their friendship would take time. Trust, once broken by manipulation and betrayal, required patience and constant effort to repair. Are you ready for today? Jessica asked. Today was the launch of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal and financial resources to women escaping abusive marriages. The foundation had attracted support from unexpected places, including several wealthy women who had discovered that their own husbands had connections to Dr. Blackwood's network. I think so, Sarah said, though she felt the familiar flutter of nerves that came with public speaking. It's strange to think that a year ago, my biggest worry was whether David would remember to pick up my dry cleaning. And now you're about to become the most dangerous woman in Connecticut to abusive husbands, Jessica said with a smile. As they prepared to leave for the foundation's launch event, Sarah's phone rang with a call from Detective Walsh. Sarah, I wanted to give you a heads up. We've had some chatter suggesting that there might be other networks operating in other states. Are you prepared for this fight to get bigger? Sarah looked at Lily, who was babbling happily in her car seat, completely unaware that her mother was becoming a national figure in the fight against domestic financial abuse. Detective, my daughter is going to grow up in a world where women know how to protect themselves from men like her father. Whatever it takes to make that happen, I'm ready. As Sarah drove toward Hartford for the foundation launch, she thought about the woman she had been a year ago, trusting, dependent, naive about the realities of power and manipulation in marriage. That woman was gone, transformed by betrayal into someone much stronger and more dangerous to the status quo. The fight had cost her everything she thought she wanted: the perfect marriage, the beautiful home, the comfortable life of a wealthy man's wife. But it had given her something much more valuable than knowledge that she could protect herself and her child, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And as she pulled into the parking lot of the community center, where dozens of reporters and supporters were waiting to hear her story, Sarah Mitchell, survivor, advocate, and dangerous woman, was ready to change the world.